What was the least impressive 1 in a million chance you've ever seen? Story 1. I walked in on my GF who appeared to be having with another guy. As it turns out she just tripped and landed on his. Haha, the odds on that happening must be pretty high. I love her so much, she is so clumsy. Story 2. Not sure if this belongs here, but I've been wanting to tell this story and this looks like the best place to put it. So here goes. The year was 1993, I am 13 years old. It's summertime and my parents are taking us to Orlando, Florida. We live in Texas, so we spend one day at Disney World and we were about to leave. I think we were waiting for that huge shuttle-looking thing. Anyways, both of my parents are smokers. Any chance they could light up, they would, since there were no signs in that area. They light up, I see a woman and her husband not far behind us and the woman is really pissed. She taps my mom on the shoulder and asks my mom, could you please refrain from smoking? I have children. I remember these exact words. My parents tried not to make a scene but my mom said, I don't see any signs, and the woman started coughing in my mom's face. My dad told her to off. Her husband tried to intervene but backed down once he saw how big of a man my dad is. It was one big mess. Anyways, we leave and that's that. 2 years later, my parents take me and my brother to Waffle House in our hometown in Texas after my basketball game. Back then, there were smoking and non-smoking sections in certain restaurants. We were in the smoking section, so we order our food and we're waiting. My dad lights up and the lady in the booth behind us gets up, comes over to us and says, could you please refrain from, and turns back to her husband and tells him they're leaving. My dad looked at us after they left and said, wasn't that the same at Disney World? Story 3. A turkey vulture dropped a rotting squirrel carcass through the sunroof of my car while I was driving. I'm not sure what the odds are, but I screamed like a little girl. Story 4. I live next to a golf course, so when golf fly into our yard, I hit them back. One day I had 2 fly in, so I took my 7-iron and instead of flying over back to the golf course, I smacked it right into a telephone pole and the ball came flying back at me. I had to swat it away with my left hand. I kinda chuckled and hit the second ball and same exact thing happened. Story 5. This was actually very impressive to me at the time. When I was about 9 years old, my family was on vacation in South Carolina and we played mini golf. My sister hit a wild shot that bounced out of our area and toward another group of players. At first we could not tell where my sister's ball went. Then she saw it, lodged in the butt crack of a large woman's pants. We were stunned and my sister did not know what to say to the woman, who apparently had not noticed the golf ball stuck in her. Eventually my dad went over and politely asked for it back. The woman and her family thought it was hilarious. Story 6. I once kicked an empty Powerade bottle and it hit a street sign pole, bounced off, flipped a few times in the air and then landed upright in my jacket pocket. Nobody was around to see, but just for that moment, I was a god. Story 7. Found out I had the same PIN as a friend when we accidentally switched debit cards. Edit. Yes, I'm aware it's only a 1 in 10,000 chance you have the same PIN as someone else. It's still pretty crazy odds considering she was the only person I've ever accidentally swapped debit cards with in the 15 years or so I've used one. Story 8. I threw a stone at a tree. It bounced off the trunk and landed on the branch just below and stayed there. The stone was about 1.5 inches and the branch was about 1 inch. I thought it was pretty impressive but no one else really cared. Story 9. At a Little League game I saw an unassisted, untaught triple play. Runners on first and second. Kid up to bat pops up to the infield. Ump calls infield fly, rule 1 out. Kid that was on first takes off running, not paying attention to the ball and blows past kid on second, 2 outs. Kid on second doesn't realize his foot is off the bag. Ball comes down, bounces, and hits him in the leg, 3 outs. Probably the rarest possible play in baseball, made completely unimpressive because it only happened due to the sheer ignorance of little kids that had no idea what they were doing. Edit. Uncaught, not untaught. Story 10. When in high school, I sneezed and all the power went out immediately. I joked and told everyone in class that I was a wizard. The lights come back on and about 2 minutes later, I sneezed again and what do you know, we lost power again. The second time around I was in shock and the entire class just stared at me in awe. Story 11. An act of love led to the intertwining of 2 strands of DNA, creating, out of the billions of possible individuals, a totally unique human, and that person was Fred Phelps. Story 12. I was in North Alabama for a family reunion of sorts, my dad's high school reunion. A few of us, only my dad's side, were visiting the house where they grew up. It was my grandmother's house. The grandmother on my dad's side. My mom was busy with work and couldn't visit. We live in North Carolina. Basically we are in the kitchen eating or talking in the morning, and we hear commotion outside. We just remembered that there was a marathon happening in this tiny little town, and for some reason the marathon was going down my grandmother's tiny little street. So my dad, dad's sister, brother, and I are standing around watching people run, when suddenly I see a familiar person. It's my uncle, but not my dad's brother from Alabama, my mom's brother, from Pittsburgh, who had never been to this town in Alabama before. He just wanted to do this particular marathon. He didn't tell my family he was running in it. He didn't know my dad's family was from there. He didn't know he would be running by our house. Even weirder, this marathon had been going on for hours, and we only decided to step outside and watch for 2 or 3 minutes. I have never been so flabbergasted in my entire life. TLDR. Saw my mother's brother, a runner, while at my father's mother's home, was a blunder. Edit. I said family reunion of sorts because it was mostly just visiting my aunt and uncle, so instead of it being all 5 children, it was just 3, so it wasn't a full-on family reunion. Geez, which I remember why we were there. It was my dad's high school reunion. That's what it was. Got it figured out now. Story 13. In high school, a friend of mine and I sat exactly diagonal from each other in the room, taking 2 of the 4 available corners. He threw a skittle at me without telling me, and it landed flush in my ear hole. Story 14 was flicking Cheetos into my buddy's mouth at lunch back in middle school, but on one attempt flicked way too hard and it went right over his head. The cheesy projectile procked to fly over the next table and towards a kid sitting at the table after that, landing in his mouth as he was about to take a bite of insert lunchtime gruel here. Got a referral for starting a food fight though. Story 15. I was researching how long it takes a raindrop to fall from the sky and hit the ground, because I was blowing my mind with the odds of any given raindrop hitting my car. So it takes about 5 minutes for it to reach the ground, and the odds of my car intercepting the raindrop before it hits the ground is crazy low because I am miles away when the raindrop forms. Anyway, after I was done researching, I got in my car to run to Walmart, and a single large raindrop hit my windshield on a sunny day. Blew my mind, and was also an unimpressive story to tell. Story 16. My friend had the original Bop It on his coffee table. I had bopped many times before, but never actually beaten it. I said, "Watch me dominate this thing," to a crowd of doubters and hecklers. I beat it on the first try. I have not and will not ever pick up a Bop It again. Story 17. I shot an Altoid mint like a basketball at my coworker's Nalgene bottle, the kind with a 34 opening from about 10 feet away. As I was warming up he said, "I will give you 100 if you make that." First try, nothing but net, what a waste. And no, I didn't make him pay up. Story 18. My mom was playing with the dog in the living room, throwing treats and toys in the air for him to catch, and whatnot. Anyway, I walk out of my room, and as soon as I turn the corner into the living room a treat lands right in my front pocket. Story 19. I was at a party, and early in the morning when we were a few people left, one of my friends decided to throw cookies at me. I got a crazy idea. He should throw it at my mouth, and drunk me would then catch it with, not my mouth, but with my teeth, you know, biting down when the cookie enters the mouth. Bam. Cookie caught between my teeth, and dead silence in the room. Then huge laughter for minutes as I took a bow for my back. Then awesome performance. Story 20. I once rolled 2d20s 20-sided dice while playing Dungeons and Dragons. My first roll they both landed on 20. One person saw and didn't really find it interesting. I posted about it on a thread and was completely ignored. Probably how this will end up too. Story 21. Not me, but my friend's story. We were taking batting practice, and the ball flew out of the outdoor cage and impaled itself on a fence spike. The rest of the team just stood there silent for a couple seconds wondering what had just happened. Story 22. I went on holiday. As I lay there in the nice sun, along comes the one person who I hate, who just happens to have flown to the same hotel as me, during the same week. Story 23. I can't really fathom how it happened, but I was playing softball, and we had a cone on the foul line. It was a small cone, maybe only 6 or 8 inches, and I hit the cone with a line drive and the ball stuck in the cone. And it wasn't like it knocked it up in the air and it fell down into it or something. It was like it just nailed it and then went inside the cone. Story 24. When I was in kindergarten, I dared the slow kid in my class to put a ketchup packet under his tray and slam it. He did, and the ketchup shot about 20 feet, straight into the eye of a girl at our table. I had to miss 10 minutes of recess for being the mastermind behind that. Story 25. My mom moved to another state by herself to take up a job that involved visiting various parts of the state. At first, she told me my brother where she was going or what she was doing, but after a few months, there was really no reason, as it was just random. So she is visiting some small town in the middle of the state and is bored of her hotel room. So she goes out on the balcony. There she watches traffic go by on the small interstate and sees travelers stop in the parking lot across the street to stretch their legs or whatever. At one point, she sees a car stop and she sees a dog jump out of the car and run. And she thinks, oh, how cute, that dog is a beagle, just like the one my son has. Now thinking of her son, she calls him just to say hi, and then sees the dog's owner pick up his phone. Just a 1 in a million chance he happened to be driving through town on an unplanned visit to the coast. They hadn't told each other, as they assumed the other was busy. Maybe it's mildly impressive, but of all the 1 in a million chances I've heard of being witness to, this was the least impressive. Story 26. I was playing on this mini cliff about 10 feet high in my friend's backyard that had vines hanging down it. I slipped and fell off backwards head first. I should have landed right on the rocks below head first, but a vine grabbed my foot and caught me before I hit the rocks. Probably saved my life, or at least saved me a ton of head trauma. Story 27. I was maybe 8 or 9 years old, standing in line at a grocery store that my mom and I hardly ever went to, just happened to be in the neighborhood, and we needed something, so my mom stopped there. As my mom and I are standing there, the guy behind us asks me what I think the lottery numbers will be that night. Pick 3. I told him what I thought they would be. I think it was 689, but not really sure anymore. We paid for our stuff, and left that night. The lottery numbers were what I said they'd be. Story 28. A buddy and I were doing a little drinking and decided we wanted spaghetti. Before we boiled the needles we each took one in our teeth and had a noodle fight. Of all the bad things that could happen, poked eye. Up the nose I made a lunging strike which he turned away from, resulting in the noodle going straight down his ear hole and puncturing his eardrum. Story 29. My lil sister threw a small piece of slightly melted butter to the back part of my left shoulder. I pick it off with my left hand and threw it back in a downward swing way. It landed on the same spot of my left shoulder. My lil sister now calls me butter magnet occasionally. Story 30. One of my friends. This guy will succeed in anything under two conditions. 1. It's a stupid bet. 2. It will only work the first time. Last time we made a bet, I bet him he couldn't put a coin through a postbox slot about 1 centimeter thick from 10 meters away. He took the coin, closed his eyes, screamed and flung the coin in the general direction. It went right in there. I now have to lick his. Story 31. I was up north waiting for some work to come in, and me and a bud were bored. We decided to make a game with a roll of duct tape and a mini Dasani water bottle where we would stand about 20 to 4 feet apart, and try to throw the bottle through the duct tape. On my first try I threw it like a spear cap. First it went perfectly in the duct tape roll, somehow flipped around right after and landed standing right side up between his legs. We quit playing after that. Story 32. I once, in one swift left to right stroke, drew a completely straight line in MS Paint. I think that this is more in the 1 in a billion territory. Story 33. One time when I about 16, my tall friend and I, who was about 6 feet tall at the time, went to a trampoline warehouse trampoline place. I was really into doing backflips at the time and would do them over the yellow barriers there, so I got an idea that my friend should stand on the yellow barrier and I would do a backflip over him. I did the backflip but was so not high enough above my friend so my feet landed on his shoulders. From his shoulders my backwards momentum sent me doing another backflip of his shoulders which I landed back on the trampoline on my feet. Story 34. Me and some friends were screwing around in the woods with some hatchets. One of them moaned, and one guy tossed us over a stream and it embedded itself into a branch an inch wide. It was perfectly parallel and it stuck there. He was probably 20 to 30 feet away, and not aiming at anything. Story 35. One of the first times my friend and I got high, we were leaving his house to go on an adventure. On the way out we passed a bowl full of gumdrops. He picked one up and in one motion he turned and whipped it at me in an attempt to start some sort of gumdrop war. The only reaction I had was to open my mouth, and the gumdrop landed perfectly between my teeth. We both stared at each other for like 5 seconds then started laughing our asses off. That was a good day. Story 36. Once at school I found a metal spoon on the ground and seeing as how I was bored I picked it up and threw it at the concrete path as I walked along. The spoon hit the path, rebounded spinning and lodged itself in the fabric covering your fly-on pants. I took a picture at the time too. Story 37. Once, I was eating at a hibachi restaurant with some friends, big group, and we're all in formal attire for something. The chef tosses up a piece of shrimp to each one of us to catch with our mouths. I go third after 2 guy friends, they both catch it in their mouths. I've never practiced this before so I already know I probably won't catch it with my mouth, but then do you know what happened? I missed it completely and ended up headbutting the shrimp in between the large cleavage of one of my female friends, at least 8 feet away. Story 38. In elementary school we were playing tag and a kid opened his mouth and looked up. I think he was caught so he was showing his disappointment. Anyways, a shit's right in his mouth. Laughter ensued. TLDR, kid had a shitty snack at school. Story 39. Around 5 years ago I went on holiday with my family and we met another family that we got on with really well. We ended up spending most of the holiday as one big group. Then, when we left to go home and promised to keep in touch, for some reason, we didn't actually keep in touch. However, 3 years later we went on holiday again to a completely different destination, only to bump into the exact same family for a second time and go on to spend the holiday with them again. We did actually keep in touch after the second time. Ninja edit. Now that I think about it, this is quite interesting. Still, thought I'd share it. Story 40. I was at the park flying my homemade remote control airplane. About 100 yards away there was a fire juggler putting on a show for a birthday party. A lot of people at the park would just go watch the fire juggler with the birthday kids. He was really impressive. On the first flight of my plane it loses control and is just flying on a slow descent, straight towards the fire juggler. After about 15 seconds it passes directly over his head and hits one of his fire batons mid-air. The baton then comes down almost burning a lady and one of the other batons burns the fire juggler because he was distracted by the plane. Also my plane nosedived after hitting the juggler and got totaled. Story 41. In Pokemon Blue version, the chance of encountering a Clefairy in MT, Moon is 1100. One time I saw 3 of them in a row, literally a 1 in a million chance. Story 42. I was looking for something in my extremely holy you can't even get from one door to the other garage one day and found one of those small, bouncy that you get out of the vending machines in a boot. I took it out, then bounced it as hard as I could against the floor cause I didn't give a where it ended up. It hit the ceiling then shot back down to the floor, and after hitting a wall the thing bounced back and fell right back into the boot I plucked it from. I was flabbergasted. I said you win, then left the garage. Story 43. At a bar, 2 of my friends were playing dart steel tip. Another very drunk friend was trying to catch the darts mid-air. We told him to stop about 50 times. Finally I said if I catch this dart on the first try will you stop? He agreed and I did. Story 44. Seems like I'm late to the party, but hey race my story. So I'm riding on the bus home from school, and I'm listening to music on my iPod. The bus driver was a cool dude. We all knew him by his first name and stuff, and he played a radio in the front of the bus pretty loudly so all the kids could have some music on the bus. So this song starts on my iPod, and as I take out my earbuds to talk to my friend, the radio dude announces the very same song on the radio. As radios sometimes do, he doesn't start the song right in the beginning but a few seconds in, and the song on the radio and the song on my iPod were in perfect sync. Like you couldn't hear the difference whether the earbuds were in or not. You cannot imagine how perfectly in sync the two were. I thought I was going completely mad, so I asked my friend to listen, and he goes, "Oh, you're playing the radio on your iPod, how funny." I was freaked out but no one else seemed to care. So yeah, I thought it was real impressive, but no one else did. Story 45 already posted this as a reply to someone but figured it is relevant here too, so copy-pasting it and expanding a little. Me and my friends play some role-playing systems, other than Dungeons & Dragons, and can come up with our own universes to play in. In one such case, in a more for the lulz universe, my brother was messing around with a power source which was out of the player's control, but the way I described it was very much like the hard FO the TARDIS from Doctor Who. Anyway, it just so happened he had another very powerful energy source on him which was the current main objective for the session, but he must have thought its safe delivery was nothing compared to what he could do by shoving it inside this temporal mystery. And thus I asked him to roll %, which is 2d10 dice to get a number between 1 and 100. He scored 97, which is a critical, and allows him to roll again. He got 60-something. The final number was pretty high, so I allowed him some minor time travel. He decided he was again going to abuse this and made a time paradox. The explanation would be too long because of the nature of the ridiculous lore. I was GM and everyone started shouting and arguing whether that should have happened and what the repercussions should be. So I rolled % again to see what the entire universal stability would roll between 1 and 100. It rolled a 1. Universe imploded on itself, and the session ended. Story 46. I was at a friend's house in his kitchen. He was in the living room sitting on a couch with his back facing the kitchen door. He asked for an ice cream sandwich from the freezer. I tossed the ice cream sandwich at his head because I'm a good friend like that. With the sandwich mid-flight, he puts his hand behind his head because was expecting me to come hand it to him. BM, perfect catch. It landed perfectly in his hand. Story 47. After grocery shopping, my roommate gingerly clipped a shopping cart with his car. We followed it to ensure that it did not hit any other cars in the area. And it'll be damned if that did not glide right into the shopping cart corral perfectly in its place from a couple hundred feet away. Story 48. I was out bowling with a bunch of people. A girl on my team sent the bowling ball off, but she shot it too high off, making the ball bounce on the lane. The ball bounced off our lane and landed on the lane next to us, making a strike. Luckily lots of people saw that. First comment BTW. Story 49. I have a bad habit of practicing stupid basketball shots, but it comes in handy. I told my friend watch this as I put up a half-court shot. I completely drilled it, nothing but net. He said I couldn't do that again if I tried. I said bullshit, you'll even do it backwards this time. Now I know you're full of. Swish TLDR. Everyone in the gym saw who was full of that day. Story 50. A long time ago, my friends and I were walking home from 7 to 11 with large slurpies. Now we were a bunch of back then. My friend was about half done and we were about halfway back to his place. Suddenly he goes, "Mum, the Slurpee is good, but it is filling," to pseudo-quote Anchorman, and out of nowhere he drop-kicks the Slurpee. Except the problem is he contacted the Slurpee not with the tip of his shoe but the broad top side of it. The Slurpee violently exploded all over his front, and the mangled cup performed a somersault over his head, spewing more Slurpee in every direction. All of us somehow ended up completely dry, and his shirt was soaked in multiple colors. Karma, I guess. Story 51. A few summers ago, while I was visiting the East Coast with me family, while we were in Boston, ironic, I'm watching a street performer and I look to my left and one of my friends that you know, but you don't know enough to hang out with them, is standing about 20 feet from me. I go up and that was that. Another time, I was walking to McDonald's with my friend when we were about 14. Our other friend is the guy to always insult you, but it's all in good fun. I say to my one friend, "Wouldn't it be funny if Sam," that's what we'll call him, drives up? I was making the assumption that he would be with his older brother and says, "Sup faggots, want a ride?" And my other friend begins to laugh and says, "Yeah, I could see that." So not even 30 seconds later, all of a sudden a car pulls up and it's Sam. And he says, "What's up faggots, want a ride?" I just looked over and my friend with the most surprised look on my face. This will probably get buried, but I've been wanting to post this forever. Edit. Another time, while we were moving my sister into the dorms in college, some helper walks around and puts a box in front of every door, and then walks away. My sister and parents go, "What do you think that is?" I just say, "What if it's Red Bull?" Just because that came to my head, we open up the box, and it is a 4-pack of Red Bull. My friends and sister think I'm psychic. Things like this have happened many times. I'll update with more when I remember them. Story 52. This blew my mind, but none of my friends thought anything of it, and they all laugh at me whenever I bring it up. I call it touch shoe. I was walking a step behind one of my friends, but was catching up with him without even really realizing. Then, all of a sudden, the tip of my right foot at the very highest point of its front swing connected with the base of his left foot, just as he was raising it to take a step. So the shoes connected for the briefest moments before moving in opposite directions. It was so perfectly timed that neither of us tripped or even had to adjust strides. I only noticed that it happened because I was looking at my foot at the time. Now if you think about all the, I guess you might call them degrees in a person's stride, as in all the positions that a person's leg and foot could be during their stride, that must be quite a lot. Then factor in a second person and the chances of us connecting at the exact right point so as neither of us tripped must be 1,000,000 to 1. It blew, and still does blow, my mind just thinking about it, but everyone else seems to find it pretty mundane. Story 53. I know this is nerdy, but I was playing Warhammer Fantasy once back when you had to guess ranges with you war machines. My friend had a Vargulf, a monstrous vampire beast, and was running along the very edge of the battlefield. I was playing dwarves so I aimed my grudge thrower, a catapult, at the Vargulf. 47 inches was my guess and my shot landed right smack on the center of the beast. My other one was when I was on my way to a friend's house. I opened up a soap bottle and read the cap just as I was walking under his roof awning. The cap said look up. I looked up and right as I did a fatty raindrop blasted me right between the eyes. You said not impressive, right? Story 54 in college, I had a professor who was in a little-known band. They made their album into a vinyl record, but only 300 copies and in Germany only despite the band being from Florida before I started dating my girlfriend, a fan of records and music, told me that she had their record. How she got it? She paid $10 for 5 random records through some website. Somehow, she got my professor's record. We've been together ever since. Story 55 installing Windows XP. I couldn't get my CD key to work. After many attempts to decipher my own handwriting, I got aggravated and banged on the keyboard, accidentally entering a full working key. Could not replicate. Story 56 Shiny Elekid. I had a buddy who found one, and then his game died before he could catch it. When he turned it back on, he went to the same area and found another. I know this isn't a Pokemon, but seriously, that's less than a 1 in 67 million chance. Story 57 I found the tiny black bead in a plexiglass cylinder of 1 million tiny beads. Most of them were blue. People were excited about finding a pink one or a green one 100, 10,000, 1100, 000 respectively, but I found the black one. Nobody would believe me because once I got it on top, this one of the bullies I had to deal with takes it and shakes it up so the black bead is lost forever in a sea of commons, like losing a Raikou in a cave of Zubats. Story 58 I had a BB gun when I was 11 and was out in the yard playing with it. There was a nail sticking most of the way out of the top of a post and I decided it would be fun to stand 15 to 20 feet away and shoot at it for an hour. I aimed my first shot for a good 30 seconds, slowly exhaled and fired. I realized when I shot that it would be difficult to tell how close I was to hitting it when I fired because the nail was hard to see from that distance given I had the woods as a backdrop. So I lowered my gun, got a little closer to see where it was, and closer, then I realized I had picked it off from 15 to 20 feet away on my first shot. It was unreal. Story 59 I religiously wear my seatbelt, but one day in high school I just plumb forgot as I was running late for work. Coming around a curve on a highway, I hit a patch of black ice and the end of my car just came out and I ended up going off the road and flipped my car end over end 3 times into a ditch where my car ended up wrapped around a large maple tree suspended in the air about 10 feet from the ground. During this process I was ejected from the car and I landed about 20 feet from where the car impacted the tree. I stood up immediately. Uninjured. I have no idea how after hitting the ground to actually see the car impact the tree where it almost instantly burst into flames and the whole car was a fireball in less than 10 seconds. Had I been wearing my seatbelt I would have no doubt been burned alive. To top it off I ran up the hill to a farmhouse to call 911. While I was up at the house, my aunt happened to be driving by and saw that my car was wrecked and on fire. She called my mother and my mom drove to the scene and arrived all before I got back down the hill. When I came down the hill she was in the middle of the highway just weeping as she thought I was dead and still in the car. She stood up and smacked me in the face and called me a, "Thanks Mom." Story 60 I once kicked a ping pong ball my cat was playing with across the room 10 feet. Maybe and it went into the hole of a box. Hole was just a couple of MMS bigger than the ball. Rather have won the lottery I think. Story 61 I was playing racquetball with my friends. All of a sudden the ball went missing. We searched for a while before I realized that the ball was stuck in the hole between the handle and the net. Story 62 as a teenager, I found 2 unopened 12-packs of beer while talking about how we should get drunk. One in the forest, one on the train, both were old style. Story 63 the wriggling that I originated from was the sole survivor of the harrowing ordeals of the female reproductive system. Millions of my would-be siblings perished around me as I struggled on, with no purpose but to clamor for the possibility to potentially throw myself into a single, much larger cell and be engulfed by it. And am just sitting here masturbating. Story 64 at a friend's house. I tried to prank my boyfriend by asking him to try and catch a peanut in his mouth when I was really going to throw a couple, ended up being only 3 and watch him scramble. When I threw them up 2 of my friends come out of nowhere and all 3 of them catch the MMS. Story 65 I was walking and smoking a cigarette on a windy day. I flicked the cigarette butt away from me, and then I reached into the pockets of my hoodie, felt something crunchy, and squished it with my fingers. The burning tip of the cigarette had broken away from the butt when I flicked it, wafted back into my pocket, and burned the out of me when I crushed it. Story 66 really late to the party, but here you go OP I was at a gas station late at night, so I had to approach the window and yell what I wanted at the attendant instead of simply walking inside. The man working there told me my total, but I was short several cents. I yelled at my little brother to throw me a quarter from the car, and turned back to the attendant to give him the money I did have. As I turned back toward my brother, I opened my mouth to ask where the quarter was. Turns out he had thrown it at me while I was turning, and I was opened my mouth to speak. It landed perfectly on my bottom lip and sat there. My brother and I exchanged a wide-eyed look of amazement and started laughing. The gas station attendant saw nothing. Story 67 I rolled 01 on AD 100 twice in a row, once to pass something, once cause someone said they would a gold brick if I did it again, was just like woo dice nerdworld dishes. Story 68 shooting hoops in the backyard and my little sister decides she wants to roller skate around in circles. I tell her to get out of here cause she might get hit with the ball. She tells me to shove it and a minute later gets a basketball in the face. Nothing malicious, just bounced off the rim and hit her. She runs inside crying to my parents. Just as I put up another shot she comes out the side door and is halfway through saying you better not hit me in the face again. And the ball hits her square in the nose and knocks her on her. Most satisfying accident ever.